Yes, this is yet another Fallout New Vegas YouTube video that proclaims its greatness to those who have somehow not yet realized that the best Fallout game you can currently play is the one that was released in 2010 from a studio not called Bethesda Game Studios. My goal in this video is to mostly focus on the narrative aspects of New Vegas and how it adapts real-world ideologies and twists them into a post-apocalyptic setting, how it reworks elements inherited from Fallout 3 to make them better, and how some of the endings for specific people and factions lack an idealized good ending, which actually makes them much more satisfying and up to the interpretation of the player to determine what they see as the lesser of multiple evils.
Truth is, the game was rigged from the start.
Fallout the IP originated with Interplay Productions, a spiritual sequel to their earlier title, Wasteland. Fallout 2 development was handed off to the internal division known as Black Isle Studios, though a large portion of the original team had a hand in Fallout 2. Work on Van Buren, the codename for the original Fallout 3, began shortly after release of Fallout 2, but was stopped when Black Isle and Interplay ran out of money in 2003. Fallout the IP was, mostly, sold to Bethesda, who revived the series with Fallout 3 in 2008, and then handed off development of a sidequel to the Interplay and Black Isle successor, Obsidian Entertainment, for release 2 years later. October 19th, 2010, we got Fallout New Vegas, and Bethesda has been seething ever since. Obsidian being tasked with a Fallout game is some kind of divine providence, as a project coordinator on New Vegas, Joshua Sawyer, joined Black Isle shortly after Fallout 2 came out, and departed the company when Van Buren was cancelled in order to form Obsidian with many others from Black Isle Studios. After working on Knights of the Old Republic 2 and Neverwinter Nights 2, as well as beginning to create their own IP with Alpha Protocol, the original Fallout team finally got the license to make another Fallout game. Fallout New Vegas is a good case for examining how copyright protection currently works. Ideally, copyright ensures the original creators of a specific work are compensated for that creation when it's used for profit. However, copyright actually favors those with enough money who are able to purchase the rights to be the sole organization that gets profits off of a work that they had no hand in creating. In Fallout's case, Bethesda did not create Fallout, but due to having enough money and interest at the time when Interplay was in a bad position, they were able to purchase the rights to Fallout for $5.75 million. How much of those millions did the developers see? Unknown. A more extreme example would be the recent purchases by media giant Disney, who in 2012 purchased the rights to profit off of Star Wars for $4.05 billion from George Lucas. He got a fat check, but what did the other 625 people, credited and uncredited, who had a hand in helping create the hit that was 1977's Star Wars get? Disney's purchase of Marvel has similar circumstances. Out of the $22 billion box office revenue Disney has made off the Marvel movies, how much is deserved by those who did the original script, pencils, inking, coloring, and letters whose works now only Disney is allowed to profit off of? With New Vegas, Obsidian was only allowed to profit off of its initial sales, and even then, due to Metacritic-based bonuses, was even cheated in that payment. Future purchases of the game and its DLC go solely to Bethesda, simply because they own the IP. Obviously, some will see no problem with this kind of structure, but much like everything in our life, it favors those who already hold the power and money and allows them to grow even larger. Not to say that Obsidian is entirely clean in the development of New Vegas. Joshua Sawyer, whose interviews post-release are quoted throughout this essay for some insight into the thinking behind the scenes, also referred to the short development time for the game as not crunch, but a sprint overtime period, which really doesn't sound much better. However, Obsidian in recent years has been outspoken in regards to refusing to be a crunch studio. Sawyer on Twitter was vocally against the reports at excessive overtime at Rockstar Games while Red Dead Redemption 2 was developed. Additionally, in the lead-up to The Outer Worlds, senior designer Brian Hines stated, "Obsidian is not a crunch studio, which is one of the things that keeps people staying here for a long time." One of its writers, Chris Avellone, has long been recognized as a great creative lead. However, very recently, as a movement of talking openly about predatory and abusive behavior in the games industry, it has come to light that Avellone would frequently attempt to get young women drunk in order to sexually assault them. Techland has ceased working with them on Dying Light 2, and other developers who have contracted him for work are revisiting his contributions. Bad people make good art, especially in cases where hundreds of people are working on the same piece of art. Avellone is not the only person who helped create Fallout New Vegas, but I will never fault anyone for refusing to play it or praise it due to his participation. My critique of New Vegas as a game is generally focused on the game, but that should also include the factors in the process of its creation. Fallout New Vegas is a really big game, one that requires over 100 hours to see nearly everything it has to offer, and that's just with the marked locations, quests, and alternate decision playthroughs. There are plenty more unmarked locations and quests that you'll stumble upon in the Mojave. This size makes New Vegas hard to talk about comprehensively, which is further complicated in that a lot of what is in this game is worth talking about. It is also hard to talk about New Vegas without comparing it to Fallout 3. With its initial release, New Vegas was generally written off as more Fallout 3. However, those who did invest more time into New Vegas generally found it to be the better game. I came to New Vegas late. My initial save is dated 2015, and I started anew in 2019. That new save ended up being the foundation for a previous essay I wrote called Violence in Fallout New Vegas, in which I detailed how New Vegas changed how enemies were presented that made its violence something you put more thought into than when facing the nameless raiders, super mutants, and ghouls of Fallout 3. This accomplishment is largely due to the reputation system of New Vegas, how it proved more effective at investing the player in decisions than the karma decision-making of Fallout 3, and how it helped enhance the role-playing aspect. New Vegas presents players with the open-world map of the Mojave, based on southern Nevada. Largely spared from the barrage of nuclear weapons thanks to the mysterious Mr. House, the land is populated with various groups and settlements. Each of them has their own simple identity you can learn about, and help or hinder their continued existence. The four major factions are New California Republic, or NCR, Caesar's Legion, Mr. House, and New Vegas Independence. Each of these major factions represent a piece of the previous world, as New Vegas is about, quote, remaking the new world in the image of the old world, according to Sawyer. Then you have the smaller settlements and people groups such as the Brotherhood of Steel, Boomers, Fiends, Followers of the Apocalypse, Great Khans, the Kings, Novak, Primm, Good Springs, and many others. No matter what major faction you choose to support, each will push you towards the various smaller factions in the lead up to the finale, ensuring everyone gets to see most of what the game has to offer. As the player character, you are the deciding factor in pretty much every conflict that exists in the Mojave. Thankfully, the writing largely succeeds in making you feel invested, or at the very least interested, in seeing these conflicts through to their end. How you choose to interact with each group directly affects your reputation, whether with that group or one associated with or against them. The karma system of good, bad, and neutral is retained from Fallout 3, but is secondary to the reputation system. Reputation allows for much more complex decision-making processes than karma alone would. The possible companion, Rose of Sharon Cassidy, or Cass for short, has a quest line in which you are pushed towards attacking a faction allied with the NCR, which will cause significant setbacks with your standing if you do. There are many instances like this where a decision isn't broken between good or bad, but instead on what faction you want to please or help, and which ones you don't. Sometimes both factions presented are ones you would like to be on the good side of. These points reminded me of some of my favorite quests in The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, the times where you would have to choose which was the lesser of two evils. Do you want to help a coup within the Brotherhood of Steel, or persist under its current leadership and hope they change their perspective on the current situation? Do you expose a rebellious ranger chief for getting people killed, even if his motives are to stir change within the NCR? This reputation system better affords the player the opportunity to take an in-fiction role than karma alone would, especially given the amount of factions. Each player wants their playthrough to be unique, even if they only ever play it once. This desire for variety also extends to how the game reacts to your choices, how it acknowledges and shifts depending on who is in power and who lived or died. New Vegas accomplishes this by ambient dialogue and introductory lines when talking to named characters, who will comment on whatever the latest update may have been. Save the NCR president and they'll mention it. Kill Caesar and they'll comment on it before the usual conversation. The latter situation is an example of where New Vegas begins to lack in its reaction to player choice. Killing Caesar doesn't really change much in the Mojave or the main questline. Some of this is covered in conversations about how the loss of Caesar will prove to be the Legion's undoing, though it will take several years. While it is understandable that the loss of their leader would not cause the Legion to immediately give up their claim on Hoover Dam, you would hope it would bring about more change than some dialogue and affect only one quest outcome. Other instances include the aforementioned Cassidy companion quest, in which I was given the choice to kill the leader of the Crimson Caravan in response to their plot to monopolize trade in the region. Doing so turns the location you are in against you, forcing you to kill pretty much everyone who doesn't run away and harming your reputation with the NCR. However, after you do this, you can come back to the same location later and find it repopulated and with no confrontation over your previous rampage. I was also disappointed, though to a lesser extent, with fiends respawning in locations where I had already taken out their various leaders. I understand the game can only be pushed so far, but I still find these points lacking in terms of reacting to player choice. Another major area New Vegas is lacking is in the Caesar's Legion questline. The canonical interpretation of New Vegas, the role the game likely wants you to fulfill, is to aid the NCR in favor of the Legion and New Vegas independence over Mr. House's rule. Your introduction to the Legion is one of brutality, an entire town massacred with heads on pikes, people crucified, and fires raging. The more you learn about them, the more repugnant they become. The more you play, the more likely you are to have your reputation with them decrease to the point of vilification, with assassins chasing you down periodically in the wasteland. Despite this, you can still choose to ally yourself to them, though it exists more as a second playthrough option, a sort of other side of the coin curiosity pleaser. Sawyer admits as much in the same interview, stating, "But the bigger thing is that the Legion didn't have a lot of its own independent content. A lot of its content was the other side of NCR content, and it seemed like it didn't have enough meat to it. There were areas that we had talked about doing for them, but hadn't planned well enough for. I think that early on there were some really risky designs that we tried to do that I would have scaled back on, and then I would have focused more on getting more content in so we could have a more robust Legion questline." Despite these small qualms, I still think the Legion is a great faction to have existed to bring about conflict in the Mojave. Their slavery, crucifixions, cleansing of settlements, and destruction of cultures they subsume makes for a great opposing force. They also serve as a great opposite to the NCR. As Caesar himself declares, I'd seen what had become of the NCR's attempt to emulate the culture of pre-war America, the infighting, the corruption. Rome was a highly militarized autocracy that effectively integrated the foreign cultures it conquered. It dedicated its citizens to something higher than themselves, to the idea of Rome itself. In Rome, I found a template for a society equal to the challenges of the post-apocalyptic world, a society that could and would survive, a society that could prevent mankind from fracturing and destroying itself in this new world by establishing a new Pax Romana. His Legion is brutal, but effective and believable for a place like the post-apocalypse wasteland. Throughout Fallout 3, I would come across many scenes of horror, bodies amputated and placed on hooks, bags of flesh all bundled together, blood and corpses strewn about the locations raiders and super mutants occupied. It was all set dressing. It served no larger purpose. With the Legion, Obsidian took that same form of brutality, but gave it a motivation, a reason for existing beyond to goad the player to render that violence back onto the inhabitants of the capital wasteland. The Legion see themselves as above the rest, so they'll burn and crucify those who defy them by simply existing. The Fiends, a smaller group, also supplant the generic Raider moniker with actual details and reasoning, though simple. They are drug addicts, a cog in the economic machine of New Vegas and the Great Khans, harassing the NCR and other citizens who wander too far away from the safe zones. A player will still net good karma for killing them, and there is little reason to ally with them aside from just doing it for the hell of it. But they still have named leaders. One I even peacefully bartered with, selling him drugs for caps. This made them more complex than the nameless raiders of Fallout 3, even if only marginally so. In an interview with Steemit, Sawyer comments on the success of New Vegas in terms of role-playing, saying, or, for example, the independent path is the most popular ending that people take, which is not super surprising. Then I've seen a lot of people comment that, yes, it's a decentralized government, but there are a lot of problems with it, so while you're free with that freedom, well, a lot of stuff kind of falls through the cracks and things aren't super safe. And, well, that's what you get. I've seen a lot of people talking about how they think through these and how they're role-playing their decisions, and that's the thing that I'm happiest about. As a tabletop designer, when it comes to making and running tabletop games, I really like it when the players feel like they have a lot of important decisions to make, and when they start arguing with each other about what to do, it's not about mechanical stuff, but rather it's about the beliefs that their characters have. And when they get really passionate about it and you can see that they really believe in this thing, it's kind of made them analyze this world through a lens where they're treating it like a real thing, a real problem that has real consequences and moral decisions and things like that. In Fallout, the Enclave represents the remnants of the American right. This comes through in their xenophobia and being largely composed of the pre-war military. Their ultimate goal in both Fallout 2 and Fallout 3 is to cleanse the wasteland of America of the other, this time anyone who isn't Enclave and has been affected and mutated by post-war Fallout. With New Vegas, we are introduced to the representative of the remnants of the American liberal left with the NCR. A recurring comment from citizens of the Mojave is that while the NCR means well, their ideals rarely match up with the actual implementation. NCR taxes are the death knell to smaller settlements and caravans, and don't even include protection, something Legion-sponsored outfits benefit from. Corruption and bureaucracy hamper any major progress. A long chain of command means reactions come slow at the cost of life, and stubbornness at the top comes at the cost of those at the bottom. While the NCR might not want to kill everyone outside of their own group, one of the most damning aspects is that they have zero imagination. When presented with a blank canvas to create something better than what came before, they chose to repeat the same form of governance that led to the destruction of the Earth. As before, the interests of the wealthy are placed before the interests of the common person. The myth of the meritocracy continues as nepotism and sexism reemerge. The NCR are the sort of group who, in the presence of an apocalyptic scenario, do nothing but try to restore things to the way they were. My interactions with the higher-ups in the NCR also led me to believe that they really don't give a shit about those at the bottom. General Oliver is a straight asshole who views himself as above everyone else thanks to rank, and I was glad to gun down his smug face in the New Vegas Independence ending. President Kimball doesn't even really do much aside from a PR move to show up at the dam, pin a medal on some private, give a speech, and disappear when danger shows up. A real man of the people. I began to believe this war against the Legion was less about protecting the people of the Mojave and more for political clout at controlling the dam, as well as being hailed as the ones who defeated the nasty Legion, even if the Courier does most of the heavy lifting in that area. Their claim over the Mojave is an example of their imperialism, expansion of power under the guise of bringing peace and morals to what they perceive as a lawless land, when in reality they just want the electricity the Hoover Dam supplies and to profit off of the economy of the Strip. The NCR has no right to own the Mojave, or any land for that matter. It comes across as some form of mirrored version of Manifest Destiny as they expand eastward. The fiction of the world lays most of this at the feet of President Kimball's direction for the NCR after President Tondi, the beloved NCR leader you can meet in Fallout 2. While I would like to think the NCR might be better reformed under a different president, knowing the purpose of the NCR imitating the previous American system means that this was inevitable. When faced with the horror of the Legion and given the alternative of the empty promises of democracy from the NCR, it isn't surprising to find that New Vegas Independence was the most popular ending choice made by players. The choice between Caesar's Legion and the NCR is reminiscent of our current political climate, where the liberal left offer up someone with no vision, a terrible record, and no interest in improving the lives of the lower class, and expects us to just automatically pick him over the other because he is, quote, better. And this doesn't apply only to the seat of the president, as we've had House and Senate leadership repeatedly fail to do much of anything with their power for the past decade, but expect people to vote blue no matter who, because they proclaim to stand for progressive ideals while continuing to grease the gears of the current system. One final major power available to choose to serve is Mr. House, the enigmatic ruler of New Vegas through his Securitron army, a focal point of either independence or extending Mr. House's reach. Modeled after Howard Hughes, Mr. House desires to rule New Vegas as an autocracy. Having already lived hundreds of years thanks to his wealth and genius, as well as protecting New Vegas from a majority of the nuclear missiles aimed at it, he sees ruling New Vegas as his right. I like talking to Mr. House, even if his ideals and end goals aren't ones that I would see through, except as a curiosity. His extreme pragmatism, logical and flat statements regarding the various powers competing can be entertaining. His disdain for my player character is obvious, as well as his self-superiority that is reflected in the other faction leaders he is so dismissive of. They all think themselves the superior and rightful owners of New Vegas, probably another reason why the independent choice is so popular. It is a big middle finger to all these smug assholes who think they could just walk in and claim this place as their own with no consent from the people who call it home. One of the NCR's main enemies early on are the Powder Gang, a band of escaped convicts with the penchant for explosives due to their railroad work. There are two main groups of Powder Gangs to find, one occupying Vault 19, and the other at a correctional facility that used to be their jail. My introduction to the Powder Gangers was at Goodsprings, where they were after a former merchant named Ringo. I rallied the town together to defend themselves from the gang's assault, which serves as the major faction decision. Due to the kindness of Goodsprings in getting you back up on your feet after your near death, as well as their general existence as a small town on the frontier, the game intends you to like and defend them from any threat, which I did. Due to this, the Powder Gangers will be hostile to you from the outset, teaching you the consequences of getting on a certain faction's bad side. As they are made up of former prisoners, the thinking behind this appears to be that can justify any violence towards them. However, when thinking about how the NCR operates, as well as their own prison system in reality, this makes it a bit harder to accept that all these Powder Gangers were justly sentenced, especially in an environment like the Mojave Wasteland. New Vegas' ending slides attempts to soothe your conscience, as all endings show a poor outcome for the Powder Gang. Whether death at the hands of the NCR or the Legion, or raiding caravans unfortunate enough to get too close to the prison if they persist. When I came across Vault 19, I found a group who had split from the correctional facility, but was lost when it came to what the next steps were. I was able to find a more peaceful solution than just killing them all, or having them return to the NCR prison system, and convince them to join up with the Great Khans, who had proved to be a thorn in the NCR side for years and would gladly welcome more members. It allowed the Powder Gangers a chance at a new reformed life through the culture of the Great Khans, whose only real defining trait is the ritual of pain required to join their ranks. This also would boost the manpower of the Great Khans, who are suffering after the massacre at Bitter Springs. The Powder Gang is also behind the trouble in Primm, an early town you'll come across on your roundabout way to the Strip. With the sheriff dead and the deputy too much of a coward to take over, I was tasked with finding a suitable replacement. My options were the NCR, Myers, an inmate who refused to join the Powder Gang, and Primm Slim, a Protectatron within the Vicky and Vance casino. I ended up choosing Myers, as I doubted the NCR would seriously protect Primm from threats, and Primm Slim seemed like more of a joke choice than a real one. While the ending slide states Myers returned to his old ways of wasteland justice that got him in prison in the first place, I couldn't help but think of my own exploits with Rose Cassidy when it came to taking justice into our own hands rather than hand it off to the NCR. Primm is the second major decision point I came across after the Goodsprings versus Powder Gang. While that one was clear-cut in terms of what I believed was the right choice to go with, Primm introduces a lot more of the morally gray choices the game at large is known for. As expected, the NCR will abandon the town at the first sign of major trouble elsewhere, though if they come out on top at the Battle of Hoover Dam, Primm will prosper despite some of the restrictions. Both Myers and Primm Slim fall under the weight of a Legion attack, though if anyone else takes power, Myers will occasionally kill before evidence, and Primm Slim will be too slow to catch any crooks. None of these are really that ideal. NCR protection and victory is probably the best outcome, but that comes at the cost of the NCR ruling New Vegas as a whole, which isn't actually ideal. Due to this, Primm is a great introduction to the more complex decision-making questlines within New Vegas, with lots of variables influencing what the ultimate outcome will be, and requiring you to think it through and accumulate information about each choice before committing. A standout quest early on that changes the way I thought about the inhabitants of the world took place within the Repconn test site. A nearby settlement called Novak wanted me to remove the feral ghouls that were occupying that location. Feral ghouls are former humans who, due to exposure to radiation, have transformed into frenzied zombie-like beings that attack whatever they see. Once I entered Repconn, a loudspeaker talked to me, its voice a clear indicator that this was one of the ghouls who have not degenerated into a feral version. I eventually met Jason Bright, the leader of the Bright Brotherhood, a group of ghouls who are helping to use the Repconn site's rockets to ascend into the stars. Jason requested I not harm the feral ghouls while I was helping them, as even though they no longer retain the same consciousness as he or I, he believed they still deserved to be included on their great journey. Repconn is likely to be one of the first interactions with ghouls on a larger scale than the 2 or 3 that make up random encounters in the Mojave. Jason's plight is effective at changing the perception of ghouls as purely beings that exist to be shot and looted. While I would still come across feral ghouls who require to be killed to survive in the Mojave, these encounters were cast in a bit more tragic light, as I recall Jason in his quest to save these kind of ghouls, the ones everyone else sees as nothing more than a nuisance. The people of Novak saw the ghouls as nothing more than a threat to their continued existence, not caring that these were once humans who, due to factors outside of their control, were made into something else. While searching the test site, I came across a ghoul named Harland, one who had set up a multitude of traps in his location and refused to leave until I confirmed the status of his friend, a female ghoul who died in the prison portion of the basement. Harland is the type of character I could easily imagine as a potential companion, as he sadly does not end up fulfilling that role. He's obviously more than competent in combat, setting up a large variety of traps that can easily kill the player character should I fail to notice or disarm them, and he has more of a personality than the others, having only joined the Bright Brotherhood for the ghoulettes, as he puts it, which is reinforced by his desire to find out the ultimate fate of that female companion trapped by the Nightkin. As most talkative ghouls are, he's self-aware as well, at one point stating, "I may look like a corpse, but I'm partial to living." Harland is simply a charming character to come across, despite your initial confrontational interaction, and along with Jason Bright, shows that ghouls are just as human as you or me despite their appearance. One additional character among the Brotherhood sticks out, Chris Haversam, a human who is convinced he's a ghoul. Originally from Vault 34, Haversam's work on the Vault's reactor and subsequent loss of hair convinced him that he was becoming a ghoul, and he left the Vault to seek out others like himself. The only problem is he is definitely not a ghoul, even if he talks in their hoarse way of speaking to fit in, and even calls me Smoothskin. Jason Bright accepted him for his technical aptitude, and near the end of their questline I could finally convince him that he is in fact human. He'll be a bit angry at the Brotherhood afterwards, but I easily convinced him to just let them be, and continue to assist them on accomplishing their great journey. After all, it was Haversam's own stubbornness that led them to giving up on convincing him he's human, and not ghoul like them. Haversam is a good example of some of the humor within New Vegas, continued soon after by visiting another site, Helios 1. There is a man named Fantastic who is currently attempting to fix the power plant. If I ask him how he got the job, he'll reply with, "They asked me how well I understood theoretical physics. I said I had a theoretical degree in physics. They said, welcome aboard." Another on-site character, Ignacio Rivas, will mention, "What he doesn't know is that the only thing the console controls is the plant's intercom system. I tried to tell him, but he insisted that the largest console had to be the most important." Much of the humor relies on dumb characters, including yourself. With a low enough intelligence, less than 3, the player character will have access to unique dialogue choices expressing just how dumb they can be. The Repconn questline also doubles as not only a way for me to empathize with the feral ghouls I may come across, but super mutants as well, a faction that New Vegas does a much better job presenting than Fallout 3 ever did. A band of Nightkin, a subtype of super mutant who are addicted to stealth boys, devices that render the user near invisible, are looking for a large shipment of them that was incorrectly shipped to this test site. This brought them into conflict with the Ghoul Brotherhood, and I am sent in to clear them out. Unfortunately for the Nightkin, I didn't even comprehend that I might be able to peacefully negotiate their exit by revealing the shipment they were looking for was returned hundreds of years ago. Instead, I murdered them all, thinking it was the only solution. Even fighting and checking the corpse of a Nightkin named Davison didn't stick out to me as unnatural. It probably just existed to denote that this one was tougher than the others. It wasn't until checking the quest online later that I found that he was the one I could have talked to and let know about the returned shipment. Despite being a fictional world to do as I please, finding out I could have peacefully dealt with this conflict made me feel bad, as generally I would prefer to leave most people alive when able to. It's an early example that killing isn't always the only route to take when solving these quests, even if it might be the fastest. Repconn's questline culminates in watching the ghouls take off in various rockets as Flight of the Valkyries plays, and with a high enough skill, you can even assist them a little more in reaching whatever it is their destination is, for no real reason other than your own charity. Answering a question on Tumblr, Sawyer mentions, "I wouldn't say it's one of the top quests of Fallout New Vegas, but it is literally the first major quest we designed, so our inexperience with the engine shows. It's been a long time since I've played Come Fly With Me, but if I remember correctly, there's a ton of back and forth that can get frustrating. Despite that back and forth, I still think the questline is exemplary in terms of communicating to the player how things work in New Vegas as compared to Fallout 3. Ghouls and super mutants are much more than just mindless red points on the UI to gun down endlessly, but have histories and reasons for existing, whether it's to accomplish a religious goal or to continue and succumb to their addictions. and that these goals can be met with a minimal amount of violence. The Nightkin's introduction at Repconn serves as an informal introduction to a quest involving the Jacobstown settlement in Mount Charleston. Jacobstown is a retreat for supermutants of all kinds led by one named Marcus, who left Black Mountain after the Nightkin Tabitha began degenerating and causing violent disputes. Supermutants currently residing in Jacobstown include a band of Nightkin led by Keen, who are waiting for a cure or treatment to their addiction. Much like the source of remorse of killing ghouls, Nightkin suffer from the same dehumanization due to factors beyond their control. New Vegas, taking place on the West Coast, means these supermutants are pretty much all former servants of the Master, the main antagonist of the original Fallout. It serves as a nice connection to the original duology of Fallout games, as well as making the supermutant people into a kind of diaspora, a people who have been spread throughout the wasteland with no unifying formal home. Supermutants and ghouls are Fallout's fictional representative of discrimination at large. As in most fantasy and science fiction that include more than the typical human, whether it be an elf, an alien, or a mutant, at least one of them is generally the replacement for people of color in that fiction, suffering from discrimination by humans, who of course have a long history of hating the other. This generally comes at the cost of simplifying and displacing the already existing internal discrimination between humans. As in Mass Effect Fallout and many other similar environments, humans have worked past our internal discrimination to instead focus solely on external ones. Jacobstown attempts to exist as a sanctuary home for the unfavored. It is situated far from the rest of the Mojave purposefully because of the violent discrimination against supermutants by the general population. Jacobstown still suffers, however, due to harassment from the NCR, who are sending mercenaries to provoke a fight to serve as an excuse for wiping them out. With the right skills, you can help Dr. Henry speed up his search for a treatment for the Nightkin population, easing their Stealth Boy withdrawals with the purpose of an eventual sober existence. Black Mountain continues to provide a home to Nightkins and other supermutants, as it is a retreat much like Jacobstown. However, this location serves as a home for the opposite purpose, a staging ground for a campaign to kill all humans. Tabitha's Stealth Boy insanity has gotten worse with the absence of Rhonda, a Mr. Handybot and Tabitha's former best friend. Restoring him can pacify the location, although I made the mistake of freeing Raoul first, leading to a violent confrontation. Most of the other supermutants I came across are some scattered Nightkin who serve as ends to humorous quests. One in Novak blames the nearby Brahmin for its headaches, and another appeared to extort me for all my caps for a single Stealth Boy. Supermutants in New Vegas are either attempting to lead a peaceful existence, or are succumbing to leaders who have given in to their addiction. Tabitha, prior to her current condition, led other supermutants to free one named Mean Son of a Bitch from NCR abuse, which included having part of his tongue cut off. Son of a Bitch eventually made his way to New Vegas in order to meet the kind man who at one point attempted to purchase Son of a Bitch to free him from the torture but was turned down by the NCR. That man was Klamath Bob, who now lives and cares for Son of a Bitch in Westside, where they both serve as a local militia force to defend the settlements from fiends and other threats. It's a sweet story that acts as a way of showing the cruelty of the NCR despite their proclamations of anti-discrimination, as well as showing that Tabitha was once more than someone who ranted on the radio about the death of all non-supermutants. Lily Bowen, a possible companion, was also a comrade of Tabitha and once a human. Long ago, the Master's army invaded her vault and turned her into a supermutant. After his death, she wandered the wastes, eventually joining Tabitha. Over time, her Stealth Boy addiction caused a split personality named Leo to emerge and grow more violent. Leo was subdued, thanks to medication by Dr. Henry when she arrived at Jacobstown. The medication did have the side effect of dulling her memory recall, including the final memories of her grandchildren captured on holotape. Advising her to take full doses means she will eventually forget her family entirely but retain control. Without the medications, she succumbs to her more violent side. She can also be advised to continue taking half doses, where she will continue to exist caught between succumbing to her other personality Leo or giving up the last connection to her pre-supermutant past. This companion quest would be more compelling if it weren't so reliant on the trope of schizophrenia and dissociative identity disorder being one and the same. Being faced with the choice of giving in to addiction or losing familial memories is compelling enough without the added weight of a split personality threatening to overtake Lily's consciousness. An early confrontation that needs to be carefully negotiated is a hostage showdown between the NCR and the Great Khans in Boulder City. The Great Khans have taken 2 NCR soldiers hostage, and NCR Lieutenant Monroe tasked me with getting them back, implicitly with force. Despite that, a high speech skill allowed me to talk down the Great Khan leader Jessup, though I needed to also convince Monroe to let them walk against his orders to kill, which costed me some money but resulted in a peaceful negotiation and increased reputation with both factions. At this point, the Great Khans haven't really been introduced formally to the player, so my only motivation for letting them live is because of their involvement in my death at the hands of Benny, and due to that aforementioned desire to see conflict end peacefully a majority of the time. This confrontation solution is a great reward for those who invested in the speech skill like I had, as I could easily kill the Great Khans, or the NCR if I so wanted, and still continue the main quest and receive the same amount of experience no matter what. This third way of peace actually ends up costing me more, as killing them would have netted me experience, and I had to pay Monroe to let the Khans go free. However, this is the only solution in which I earn reputation with both sides, which, in the terms of how New Vegas' world works, is more valuable than caps or experience. At this point, the NCR has been presented as the de facto good against the ultimate bad, Caesar's Legion, but Monroe's orders to kill, despite the willingness to end peacefully, shows some of the cracks in NCR's workings. This especially comes ahead when you learn of a previous NCR interaction involving the Great Khans, the massacre at Bitter Springs. Craig Boone, a possible companion, is haunted by the events of Bitter Springs, referred to as a massacre by most who will talk about it, though few give details. The Great Khans were a formidable power in the Mojave before the introduction of the NCR. Great Khans began raiding the NCR as soon as they appeared, which eventually led to constant conflict until the NCR routed the Great Khan raiders to Bitter Springs. A group called 1st Recon was sent along a ridge with orders to kill anyone and everyone in the settlement, or making their way towards it, which resulted in the death of a large number of civilians, including women, children, and the elderly. The NCR largely leaves the massacre unacknowledged, not wanting to hurt their image as the good guys in the Mojave, though most of those who know of the event know of their culpability, whether due to miscommunication or not. Bitter Springs is a catch-all for nearly every massacre perpetrated by the U.S. and its military, from the Native Americans to Vietnam and drone strikes in the Middle East. Boone cites the massacre as a major reason for leaving the NCR, along with finding and marrying Carla, who could calm his guilt over his participation. I first met Boone in Novak, a location that became my home. Boone comes across as your journal tough guy with his beret, sunglasses, tone, and no-nonsense way of speaking. Over time, you learn the reason behind his hardened exterior. Before Boone will join you, he will ask you to find out who betrayed him and his wife, leading to her disappearance from the settlement and leaving him heartbroken. Talking around, mainly to Nobark Noonan, a conspiracy theorist, will point towards Jenny Mae Crawford, that old lady who works the front desk of the motel where I was staying. Looting the safe by her desk, I found a bill of sale for Carla. Crawford hated Carla for her attitude towards Novak, something that is hinted at if the player picks up the "where's the quickest way out of this dump" during the initial conversation with her. Doing as Boone requested, you can lure Crawford out in the open and he'll kill her, asking afterwards for proof of her guilt. Eventually, during my travels, I got Boone to open up about his wife's ultimate fate. Boone was able to track her after her abduction to Cottonwood Cove, though Boone found the place full of Legionnaires and Carla being auctioned off as a slave. Boone decided to kill her out of mercy, sparing her from a life of slavery among the Legion, but obviously taking a toll on Boone and justifying his intense hatred for the Legion. Eventually, I also unlocked his companion quest, which saw us returning to Bitter Springs to face his past and repelling an attack by the Legion. This battle ends with a dialogue choice to push Boone towards moving on from the past or letting it continue to fuel his anger. Should the NCR win the Battle of Hoover Dam, Boone will re-enlist if he makes amends, or kill the officer in charge of the massacre if he's pushed towards revenge. Should New Vegas claim Hoover Dam, he'll continue to do mercenary work either with his wife or caps on his mind, depending on the choice made. Lastly, if Caesar's Legion wins, Boone will either be a phantom threat ever present in the Mojave, or go down in a blaze, even speeding in the Legate's eye during his crucifixion in front of everyone. Boone doesn't really get a happy ending in any of these scenarios. Re-enlisting with the NCR might end up leading to the same massacre as before, and mercenary work is no real escape from the mind. There is no absolution for Boone while living. Due to this, maybe his death is really the only good ending you can provide, whether by the Legion's hands or the violence of the wasteland. Another companion, Rose of Sharon Cassidy, simply known as Cass, is a former owner of Cassidy Caravans, whose business was ended when her caravan was destroyed while she was tied up in NCR bureaucracy. I first met her when working for the Crimson Caravan doing some odd jobs for Caps, one of which included convincing her to sign off on Crimson Caravan purchasing hers, despite its non-existence. I already had Boone as my companion at the time, so it wasn't until I had finished his companion quest that I came back to take on Cass, which began her own companion quest to pay respects to the end of her company and investigate rumors of other caravans being ambushed and wiped out. This led us to several locations before the truth was deduced. Alice McLafferty and Gloria Van Graff were working together to form a monopoly in the Mojave by any means necessary. The destruction of the various independent caravans and subsequent buyouts were to ensure their total domination of trade in the region. At this point, I had negotiated the Crimson Caravan to supply the NCR at McCarran with extra supplies, meaning killing Alice meant taking a significant hit to my reputation with the NCR. Despite this, the only alternative was to find and hand in evidence of collusion to the NCR and allow them to handle it. By this point, I was well experienced in how slow-moving and uninterested the NCR was in crimes such as these, that I opted for some good old wasteland justice. We killed the Van Graffs first, as their hold on Freeside was already a net negative for that settlement. Then I confronted Alice, turning her employees against me as well. Later, I found that turning in evidence to the NCR would result in them blackmailing the two parties, enacting strict trade laws with little resistance, strengthening their supply lines and their position in the Mojave, which isn't really an ideal ending to me. My ending revealed the NCR suffered due to these unsolved killings, which didn't really cause any pangs to my conscience. Cassidy herself is a warm companion to have. She's a heavy drinker, with whiskey the preferred type, and her perk allows the player to benefit from alcohol without the negative effects that come along with it. Talking to her, she'll express her view on the Legion as evil, but the NCR as better, though not an ideal replacement due to their greed and self-interest, and most importantly, their lack of offering protection despite their taxation income on caravans and traders. She has the kind of contempt for the NCR I could relate to, if a bit more loyal than my formerly nameless void of a player character does due to her upbringing. An important NCR base is Camp Forlorn Hope, located near the Colorado River, north of Nelson and east of the 95 as I head north from Novak. Here I found quite a few quests, from investigating who was stealing medical supplies from the doctor's tent to retrieving missing supplies. One quest that is quite lengthy, as it required me to visit a number of ranger stations, is called Return to Sender. I needed to make my way to various stations across the Mojave in order to update that station's radio codes, to secure them against interception by the Legion. After finding out Forlorn Hope has been receiving non-existent reports, I was directed towards Camp Golf and Chief Hanlon, who all the reports have gone through. Confronting Hanlon leads to him explaining his actions. Frustrated with the NCR at large, Hanlon began a misinformation campaign in order to weaken their hold over the Mojave in the hopes that a rebellion would take place and the Mojave abandoned in favor of more secure holdings in California. Exposing Hanlon leads to his suicide, robbing the Rangers of a great leader. Leaving Hanlon to continue his work may lead to him denouncing General Oliver and President Kimball, as well as being elected senator of Reading, his hometown. Convincing Hanlon to stop either leads to his death at the hands of Legion, or a simple retirement to his home. Hanlon's motivation for his misinformation is one I can get behind, as it tries to effect a change in the NCR, one whose corruption and self-interest is reflective of our own, specifically the empty liberalism of the Democratic Party that I've talked about before. But much like our current system of government, my belief in internal reforms bringing about necessary change is low. The rich are secure in their power. Internal changes can only do so much without affecting the influence money has from outside that system. The rich are secure in their power. Internal changes can only do so much without affecting the influence money has from outside that system. Radical individuals can only do so much against a much larger foundation that has existed much longer than their current lives. It is not in the interest or the structure of the NCR for the power held by the military wing and the current president to change, and they will oust any internal attempt to do so. Hanlon is another character who has no real good ending. The change he wishes to see will likely never come, and the best he can aspire to do is utilize his influence to sway others to his cause. It wouldn't really be a Fallout game if the Brotherhood of Steel, with their recognizable power armor, weren't loitering around somewhere in the wastes. New Vegas displays them in a much harsher light than the jingoism of Fallout 3. Here in the Mojave, the Brotherhood are a minor force, more of a group of raiders who kill and steal whatever energy weapons they can get their hands on. They hide in an underground bunker complex away from the NCR after a disastrous last stand at the Helios 1 site. Their introduction also doesn't really do them any favors, as an explosive collar was strapped to my neck when I entered the bunker at Hidden Valley. They come across as thugs on their back heels due to the Helios 1 incident that saw their commander, Elijah, replaced with McNamara, who himself is facing an impeachment due to his extreme isolationism and bunker lockdown. Very few are allowed to go in and out of the bunker, leading to low morale within the ranks, most notably with head paladin Hardin, who seeks to replace McNamara and return the Brotherhood to their former ways. Sticking with McNamara turns out to be the wise decision, as, if Hardin were to take power, peace between the Brotherhood and the NCR is impossible. McNamara has a change of heart should you finally complete all his requests, and he will relent on the lockdown and once again have the Brotherhood go on quests to find technology for them to hoard. The Brotherhood has some unmarked details within them, such as head scribe Taggart, who reportedly picked Initiate Watkins not for her work, but for her looks, calling to mind the sort of workplace predatory behavior ongoing in our own world. This is made worse by the environment of the bunker, which includes virtual reality pods for training, and undoubtedly a great opportunity for Taggart to inspect the Initiate's motionless body. Suffice to say, Taggart gets nothing but 2 to the back of the head. The Brotherhood of Steel in New Vegas sticks to its more militaristic roots, from the original Fallout games, as McNamara's name being an example. In Fallout 3, the Brotherhood was a de facto good, so much so that the DLC that allows you continue your save post the original Blackout ending was solely centered on aiding the Brotherhood oust the remaining Enclave forces and awarding you with positive karma for helping the Brotherhood. Though this is somewhat reconciled with the existence of the Brotherhood outcasts, those who still clung to the original creed of the Brotherhood, Fallout 3's Brotherhood of Steel are still the good guys of the Capital Wasteland. New Vegas' Brotherhood hate the NCR due to their many disputes over who has the hold on technology, as the Brotherhood consider technology and power over it their religious right and continual obsession. The NCR, of course, wants whatever technology it can find, as well, to expand their own power, and leads to many confrontations between the two. One such confrontation included the Brotherhood attacking the NCR gold reserves, forcing the latter to abandon the gold standard and causing inflation with their money as compared to bottle caps and Caesar's coinage. An interesting reinterpretation of the United States leaving the gold standard as well, with less violence, of course. Due to their limited presence compared to Fallout 3, it could be hard to really talk extensively about the Brotherhood of Steel's Mojave chapter. They aren't really a faction I would ever consider backing, as their ideology is executed by raiding, killing, and taking what they deem to be theirs by right, a recurring theme among the factions of New Vegas. However, I also hesitated when presented with the option to utilize the self-destruction option within the Hidden Valley bunker. Most of its inhabitants were born into this life and therefore had no choice. This conflict is part of Veronica Santangelo's companion quest, but I sadly never recruited her or even knew she was recruitable during my journey. Her time above ground searching for supplies gives her a perspective on the world the others do not share. Growing up within the Brotherhood also means she has a bone-deep loyalty to them despite fundamental disagreements on how they are run. Every ending slide for Veronica includes feelings of bitter fondness or loneliness due to that divide within her, and I really wish I had been able to work through it firsthand. A similarly isolationist but important power in the Mojave are the Boomers, a group of former Vault dwellers who have now overtaken the Nellis Air Force Base and its artillery guns that immediately blow up anyone making their way to the base. I first encountered their guns unknowingly after exiting a train tunnel and hearing the far-off booms before explosions tore me apart. Reloading my autosave, I tried to make a run for it past the building debris but failed, leaving the area for later exploration. Eventually, I was tasked with making contact and found a helpful guide near the formal entrance to the area, who helped me avoid death long enough to talk them down and allow me entrance. Their quests consist of just doing some odd jobs to aid in their self-sufficiency, from clearing out a solar generator station and fixing its dishes, finding someone one of the residents has a crush on and getting them together, to retrieving an old bomber from the bottom of Lake Mead, both the climax of their quest line and based on actual history, which was a nice touch of local recognition. They even have a mural of their history and hopeful future, repairing the sunken bomber and using AR training pods to pilot and bomb enemies from the sky, something that actually pays off greatly during the Battle of Hoover Dam. The Boomers may be hostile towards all outsiders, but since they keep to themselves and eventually open up and aid me later on, it's hard not to see them as just an exuberant bunch of kids with grenades. Their late addition and isolation makes them something of an autopilot faction to work with, as despite their gruff charm, there wasn't much for me to engage with. Instead, the rewards are a bit more mechanical than narrative, as you get a rebreather to aid in retrieving the crashed bomber, something that is necessary for underwater exploration, as little of it as you will come across in the Mojave. The New Vegas Strip itself is made up of 3 families, the Chairman, Omertas, and White Glove Society, each occupying a specific casino on the Strip with their own leadership structure and culture. The Chairmen are run by Benny, the man who shoots me and left me for dead due to my possession of the Platinum Chip at the very beginning of the game. Benny, oh Benny, you dumb idiot. Voiced by Friends actor Matthew Perry, which I actually didn't realize until after finishing my first playthrough, Benny is the one who sets up the independent New Vegas quest line by his theft of the Platinum Chip, a MacGuffin of sorts that is key to Mr. House's plan to activate and upgrade his Securitron army, though the player can choose to assert Mr. House and take over for themselves or the Strip. While he may have shot me in the head, I didn't really view Benny as that much of a threat to myself, and using my Black Widow perk, ended up sleeping with him when I confronted him in the tops. Despite being given the opportunity to kill him in his sleep, I chose to let him go, as I believed letting him live would be much more interesting than just killing him out. He left a note in the morning and ended up captured by the Legion. While I was able to save him during an accidental trip to the fort while vilified that ended in Caesar's death, sadly he leaves the game for good. This is likely due to being wanted for death by Mr. House, the chairman, great cons, and probably even more people due to his various actions. Benny is charming in his dialogue, and his desire to see a New Vegas free from the NCR, Legion, and Mr. House is admirable. He also has a chipper attitude about pretty much everything, as even when captured by the Legion, his dialogue only takes a turn for the worse if I choose to have him crucified. Otherwise, it's the same wise-ass Benny talk I get. Across from the Lucky 38, Mr. House's home, is the Gomorrah, home to the Omertas and prostitution. Modeled after the Mafia, the Omertas are made up of pretty much bad people all around. I was sent to investigate a possible threat from them by the NCR, and found an angle on one of the lower-level thugs, Cucino. From here, I could either turn him in for favor with the bosses and help their bomb plot, or aid Cucino in killing the bosses and taking over himself. The only issue is that I had helped Joanna earlier, who told me how Cucino treated her, as well as reading his journal, through which I found that he had a long history of abuse and generally immoral acts that make him less than an ideal partner to fight the upper echelons of the Omertas with. My original decision was to turn him in for what he did to Joanna, but found out that helping the bosses, Big Sal and Nero, ended with a bombing of the Strip, as they were working on behalf of the Legion. Reloading an old save, I aided Cucino until Big Sal and Nero were dead, then gunned down Cucino while his back was turned after the fight. Good old wasteland justice. Lastly, there is the White Glove Society. They are foreshadowed frequently in dialogue as having a terrible secret that can pretty quickly be deduced to be cannibalism. Entering the casino, I encountered a Brahmin banner, basically an ultra-rich guy, whose son has gone missing. While the outcome seems obvious, the actual execution and conclusion was surprising. As it turns out, the White Gloves have long ago outlawed cannibalism, but it appears one of the higher-ups wants to bring it back. I found the missing son after a fun sequence of events that involved finding a dead detective and fighting off some White Glove thugs before meeting a White Glove member Chauncey in a hot sauna rendezvous before he's shot dead. These mysterious deaths are a fun plotline to track, especially since I didn't know who was behind the attempted return to cannibalism until my talk with Chauncey. It turns out Mortimer was going to secretly feed the missing son, Ted, to fellow members and tell them the truth about it after in an effort to get everyone back onto the cannibalism train. I saved Ted, cooked fake human meat to serve at the dinner, and jumped out with Ted to expose Mortimer following his big speech. This caused him to flee and allowed me to kill him with no repercussions. I returned the missing son Ted to his father, convinced him not to hold this against the entire Strip, wrapping the entire affair into a nice clean bow, despite the previous deaths. Thanks to Fallout's engine, their corpses are still likely where I left them, which is really more comedic than horrifying. One is in view of an open door in a hotel hallway, one in the banquet hall, and another in the sauna. One of the only truly altruistic factions I came across in the Mojave are the followers of the Apocalypse, who, despite their strange name, are actually a small collection of doctors and other intellectuals who seek to spread knowledge throughout the land with no ulterior motives. Their main headquarters is at the old Mormon fort in Freeside, where they run a clinic and can be talked to for a variety of quests. Mainly you talk to Julie Farkas, a female doctor with a great haircut. She'll assign you to help kick some citizens' addictions, help provide a home for an aspiring great con poet, and accept medical supply donations for an eventual safe house key and faction clothing. Previously enjoying a relationship with the NCR, the followers split after the NCR's imperialist ways became more and more surfaced in their domination of the West, with the followers helping those who suffered due to those expansions. They are an antithesis to the Brotherhood of Steel, who take and keep knowledge for themselves, whereas the followers seek to share it with everyone for the betterment of everyone. It is unfortunate that the best ending for the followers is an NCR victory following a pledge of support, as the rest of them see them leading the old Mormon fort or being unable to keep up with the influx of patients. There was also a small connection between the followers and the Legion, as Caesar was originally a member of their organization before he became radicalized by the horrors of the wasteland and began to form the Legion thanks in part to his prior education. Being the only truly altruistic faction in the game, they are also among the weakest, as their lack of lust for power means they are frequently kept understaffed, undersupplied, and under-equipped to deal with any external threats. At the very least, in the old Mormon fort area of Freeside, they have the Kings to rely on. The Kings are a group of mostly humorous Elvis Presley impersonators, only they don't know who Elvis Presley is. They only know of someone referred to as the King, what his hairdo and outfit look like, and his way of speaking. Now, the Kings are generally good-natured kids, offering guard services to those in Freeside, and despite their confrontations with the NCR, are really a good group just trying to keep the peace in their own stylish way. The Kings even have respect for Ghouls and Nightkin, as their reactions towards the presence of your optional companions Raoul the Ghoul and Lily the Nightkin are, respectively, "Nice to see a human palling around with the Ghoul. I see a lot of people around here avoid them." And, "Whoa, that's a whole lot of mutant you got with you there. Still, as long as it doesn't cause trouble, it's all good." My main interaction with the Kings was to settle some friction between them and the NCR. After a lot of investigating and dialogue choices, a firefight between the Kings and the NCR can be talked down. My appreciation of the Kings probably peaked when the King, leader of the Kings, stated, "It's time for a little more talking and a little less fighting," in regards to their confrontations with the NCR. An example of willingness to broker peace I really had not come across in any faction of power. The King's reign over Freeside is a net benefit to the little settlement, as it's outside the Strip and the Securitron deterrent, despite housing the only Strip entrance. The Great Khans were a formerly strong tribe in the Mojave before their massacre at the hands of the NCR at Bitter Springs. They relocated to Red Rock Canyon, though this location is not suitable for long-term residents. Having mainly talked my way through Great Khan encounters, I was able to peacefully enter their settlement and meet their leader, Papa Khan, who is in the midst of negotiating with the Legion ambassador Carl. Knowing the truth behind what happens when tribes are assimilated into the Legion, I immediately knew to help Papa Khan's son Regis convince the other lieutenants to speak against the Legion Pact. My favorite part of this questline was when I was able to provoke Carl to speak against the Great Khan and force them to kill Carl in anger. Carl, as a Legion representative, is a smug asshole, so goading him into speaking ill of the Khans in comparison to the Legion was very satisfying. After doing some additional talking around to former contacts I had made, I was able to inspire the Khans with the history of the Mongol Empire, and with it they left for Wyoming in the end, creating a new empire for themselves in the Northwest. Typical of the empty liberalism of the NCR, the ending slide for if Papa Khan is replaced by his son and allied with the NCR, the following victory and expansion sees the Great Khans relocated to a barren reservation, reflective of the treatment of Native American tribes by the American government throughout time. Despite my thoroughness in finding every marked location in Fallout New Vegas, there were some important things I actually entirely missed. I never discovered the Remnants, or took on Veronica, Arcade, Raoul, or Lily Bowen as companions despite temporarily recruiting the latter two. I'm sure there are also lots of marked and unmarked quests I simply didn't initiate or keep track of, even though I tried to occasionally work my way through the miscellaneous journal entries and items as well to make sure that I had done whatever it was that these permanent items and entries related to. Some I also locked myself out of due to factional allegiances, such as never working with the Van Graffs due to killing them all alongside Cass, or any of the Legion main quest arcs due to killing Caesar after an accidental raft ride. These alternative choices remain tempting, especially considering I have save files at the proper divergences, but the time sink required to see them through puts me off, as I've already spent so much time on this game, while more sit on my shelf that I want to play and write about. As I have mentioned several times before, certain aspects and mechanics exist more likely as inheritances of Fallout 3 than as an intentional inclusion by Obsidian. This is because Obsidian was given the Gamebryo engine in 18 months of development time, leading to the sprint overtime as Sawyer described earlier, during which, as PC Games N puts it, they had to get to grips with new development tools, write 65,000 lines of branching dialogue, design quests, create characters, improve the mechanics, for example, adding down and aim down sights mode for guns, creating a faction system, disguises and more, and even build the world. Due to this, things that were part of Fallout 3 were simply left to exist, as removing them would prove more trouble than it was worth. This is why you can have things like the IGN quiz, as to whether you can even tell the difference when the UI color is removed. Some of the strengths of Fallout 3 return in full form. Open world games have a special appeal to the lizard portion of our brain that enjoys seeing things checked off, markers filled in, and completion and accumulation slowly increased over time. Fallout 3 still excels in giving players a large map full of marked and unmarked locations to discover, loot, and leave behind, and New Vegas fulfills all of this as well. That distinct joy at hearing the sound effect of leveling up, successfully passing a skill check, completing a quest, returns and retains that base level of appeal. Having grown up in Las Vegas, the recognition of many locations rendered in New Vegas is a weird joy not often felt. Seeing locations such as Boulder City, Bonnie Springs, rest in peace, Lake Las Vegas, Primm, and many other smaller locations that are never thought of or mentioned when talking about Las Vegas. The recognition is weird but strangely satisfying. A loading screen with a sign for the exits on Sunset and Russell Road called to mind the memories of when I lived right in that location. Obviously, the game has significantly scaled down and altered the actual size and layout of Southern Nevada, but it remains a pretty faithful representation of the place I still call home. When it comes to skill checks in New Vegas, Obsidian opted for straight-out pass or fail scenarios instead of the percentage chances of Fallout 3, which allowed any character to reload a save and reroll their chances until success. In New Vegas, if you fail to accumulate enough survival skill points, those options are cut off from you, though they will still be presented as a reminder of what you're missing. As I mentioned before, players love to feel as if their character and playthrough is unique, even if they never end up running an alternate playthrough to see the other side of those decisions. The simple existence and presentation of them is enough to satisfy that fervor for RPG elements. That survivalist skill is also a callback to the more hardcore original Fallouts that included more specific skill types such as traps, gambling, throwing, first aid and doctor instead of medicine, and outdoorsman. These skills were streamlined and combined or thrown out altogether in modern iterations, and survivalist is a way for the game to acknowledge this older character creation process, especially when combined with hardcore mode, which requires players to eat, sleep, drink, and heal over time with all forms of recovery. By default, the main game has a majority of healing items that will heal over time in contrast to Fallout 3. This means that while you can pause the game to consume untold amounts of food and drink, they are not going to automatically bring you back to full health upon exiting your Pip-Boy. This means consumables are not a get-out-of-jail-free card when it comes to combat, though Stimpaks retain the instant healing effect from Fallout 3. The Stimpak instant heal, though, is even nerfed in hardcore mode. The prestige at completing the game in hardcore mode is appealing, as now with a full understanding and grasp on how the game works, as well as foreknowledge of choices, locations, enemies, and weapons, it would entirely renew the challenge of the Mojave. However, as mentioned before, the time sink is just something I can't currently justify, given how many other things I want to do and how much time I've already sunk into this game. Speech is another skill that is utilized throughout all of New Vegas and its quests, followed by, probably in order, barter, science, medical, survival, explosives, lockpick, and guns. Black Widow and Trichez La Femme were invaluable perks to include for my character, as they also open up new possible dialogue options with men and women respectively. Though I was eventually able to accrue enough points and a majority of skills by the end, there were still plenty of options cut off for me throughout my time, due to either not appointing enough points overall, or simply ignoring a specific skill I didn't see much use for. Lastly, it would not be a Fallout New Vegas video essay without mentions of problems with technical performance. I had a few hard freezes that required a hard reboot of my PlayStation 3, though not as many as you may think would occur for a 100+ hour save file. Sometimes I would get really bad slowdown in areas, especially late game fights, where the frame rate would be just awful, like single digits bad. There were a couple instances of extreme color changes or assets of like my Pip-Boy being unbearably bright to look at. My weapons at one point disappeared after leaving a casino. After some online searching, I found out that giving my companion weapons and entering and exiting a casino can sometimes lead to those weapons on their person just disappearing permanently, which really sucked, as the unique named missile launcher was among those that went into the great beyond. And just random stuff. The pool area in Gomorrah would very often freak out with texture tearing and just walls of flat, intangible textures jittering and shooting out around me until I went through a door. One time, after fast traveling to a location, I just got shot up straight into the air and died upon landing, which was actually kind of funny since it reminded me of those great videos of players dying in Skyrim due to the giants and being launched in space. And lastly, NPCs randomly spawning as I approach an area or after fast traveling to said area. An undercurrent throughout my detailing of the various available endings for specific factions and characters is that you are not always going to come across a clear-cut, good ending for all of them. The karma system by itself meant that you could pretty easily trace a canonical playthrough for Fallout 3 that you can't do for New Vegas. While the NCR may at first appear to be the canonical faction to bring it to power, the many, many faults I've pointed towards throughout this essay would hopefully convince you otherwise. Independence, as quoted before, brings with it many of its own unique problems, and of course, Legion and Mr. House are out of the question in regards to a consistent canon. Instead, the player makes their own canon, as this lack of consensus means that there is much less strength behind the game pushing you towards a specific outcome, and much more strength behind it allowing the player to determine their own, and that is greatly appreciated. Fallout New Vegas is a really good video game, though there are plenty of YouTube videos and essays already telling you that, and all I can hope to do is bring a new perspective as to what really makes it special and superior to the Bethesda iterations of Fallout. And if not, at least I can reaffirm that New Vegas is by far the best Fallout game I've played, for its many reinterpretations of elements set down by Fallout 3, as well as introducing a lot of its own fiction to the world in the forms of factions and their histories and unique quirks, as well as faithfully continuing where Fallout 2 left off. Fallout New Vegas remains worthwhile a decade after release, and that's just on PlayStation 3, without the innumerable mods available on the PC version that makes it run better and adds their own quality of life updates, graphical overhauls, and additional content to enhance and enrich your time in the Mojave.
And so the Courier's Road came to an end, for now. In the new world of the Mojave Wasteland, fighting continued, blood was spilled, and many lived and died just as they had in the old world. Because war never changes.